Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you're new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and a link in the info box below the video once it's rendered. Most importantly, if you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show. Sharing increases the live audience, of course, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you are new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by A Plain Truth, Sleeping Warrior, and Ranty Flat Earth. How are you all doing?
All doing good.
Tired of not having any evidence of a ball.
No, very little, if any.
Well, the World Cup's on. The World Cup's on. Plenty of balls there.
World Cup, you say?
Yeah.
Is that a football thing?
Post Nation won 5-0 last night in their opening game, didn't he?
I have no idea. I don't
Right,
have a
we should
TV.
be Saudi Arabia 5-0, I believe.
Fascinating.
There's spheres there anyway. That's one thing we found. Found sphere football.
Spheres do exist, yes. I won't ever deny that spheres do exist.
I really don't understand what the issue was yesterday.
That's why I hosted today.
Go on.
That whole conversation about spheres and all that, I remember now. Who was it that was saying that? It was it not was?
No, it was the other Muppet. Dawn.
No, it wasn't Dawn. It was the guy from Australia, New Zealand. What was his name, Nate?
Was.
Josh.
Yeah, Joshua. The most boringest baller I've ever come across. He actually sent me asleep yesterday. So if you're out there listening, Josh, you actually sent me asleep.
They might send you in again to try and send you to sleep again.
Yeah. It's the only way you can beat us, by boring us to death that we all fall asleep.
Any
I
signs
do have
of...
an interesting, an interesting point to make about the precession we see on a gyroscope. I think I'll leave that until a little bit later on because it's quite interesting. But I want to do it when there's more people watching.
A bit of housekeeping first, you mean?
Yeah, we'll do the housekeeping.
Right, so I think we've covered one. Any signs of curvature?
Again, for the third day on the run, Slice Barkane claims that he's seen curvature in some of my evidence, and I've challenged him to come on and present it and challenge it, and let's see if there is actually evidence of curve. And at the moment, to this point, there's been nothing. So, Sly, you're being called out.
What about Rumpus?
I'm getting a beer belly. Does that count?
No.
Okay.
Has Rumpus come up with his explanation for why that lands there?
Nope.
That's got to be 8 weeks since the conference, right? It was a day before the conference that he said he claimed he'd pre-recorded a hangout already with, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil.
Yeah. I've got to be honest. I've had to block Rumpus. I think he's fallen from grace that much that he's now gone into the category of dishonest. So I've got him blocked. I've had a back and forth with Mick West. Oh, actually, I'll read his most recent email.
Oh, hang on. Can we wait? Can we finish the housekeeping first then? Seems like you've got a fair bit to present today.
Any signs of axial rotation?
Nope.
Nope.
Vacuum
Right.
next to a pressurized system? Any signs of that?
Nope.
Any retractions made for the omission of perspective when calculating globe Earth versus a photograph?
Joking, aren't you?
Although I do believe Mick West has altered his metabunk curve calc again.
Yeah, yes.
Mm.
He
Does he
hasn't done
account
the
for
change that he's
perspective?
supposed to have done, though.
Does he account for perspective now?
Nope.
Why not?
He makes a link to his website instead. He talks about he's added a distraction to his website rather than a correction. I don't know.
All right. Well, we'll just have to raise the issue again.
He thinks that the word bend is the same as deviate from straight.
Okay, I've no idea what that reference is, but what I do know is that everybody who has ever used Earth curve calculations to account for a photograph has been using an orthographic view and not a perspective view in terms of what the, if you can call it that in quotes, picture that the mathematics creates. Well, that's wrong. You do have to account for an angular size reduction at distance, and nobody ever has. So this angular size reduction has to be applied prior to the Earth curve calculations to establish exactly how much you would drop after the thing has reduced in angular size. Nobody's done it, and they must. We do encounter perspective. Every globe head who's ever used a globe Earth calculator has got it wrong.
Yeah, and I don't think they'll ever accept it. They'll all play dumb and they'll all pretend that it's not meant to be. But the reality is that the only time that we see objects at full height is when we're looking orthographically.
Right.
The fact that you have to zoom into objects on the horizon is proof that we need to do that. It's embarrassing that these ballers pretend that they don't understand it, and some of them probably don't. I reckon that most of them probably don't, but the ones that do get it, they know.
Yeah, they're just perspective deniers, the people who presumably understand it but deny it. It's like,
Yeah,
if you want to say
that's
there's no
what we're talking
perspective
about.
in your view of the world, then that's fine. You're just a fantasist.
Yeah, so we're talking about people like Ruhif, Rumpus. We're not talking about people like Dawn Treader. I think Dawn Treader is one of the first to admit that he probably doesn't understand all aspects of it. And I reckon this is probably one of the ones that he'd probably admit that he probably doesn't understand it. Even though he claims that he did it in college because he did art at college, in which involved perspective drawings. I think he'd still not realize that this is a prerequisite of first person view perspective. You have to account for the angular size reduction or the apparent angular size reduction, and we correct for it by zooming in. Now, obviously, you don't have to zoom in when you're doing an orthographic drawing, but in real world, first person perspective, which is what we all experience the world in, you do. You have to zoom in, and that fact means that you have to adjust the height. So when it comes to applying the hidden value, the refracted hidden value, we don't apply it at a full 1,000 feet when it's 30 miles away. We apply it at 1,000 feet from 30 miles, which turns out to be about 250 feet. And that puts almost all observations over 25 miles behind the curve of the Earth. We shouldn't see pretty much anything. Mick's pretending that he doesn't understand it either. They're just trolling.
Yeah, they presumably somebody somewhere understands that it not accounting for perspective is a very big problem, no matter how much they deny it. And if they don't think it's a problem, well, that's what we're here for.
To remind them.
Yeah, we do experience perspective. Sorry, perspective denying globe heads. That's just a fact of life.
I struggle accepting how so many of these ballers can still be ballers with any ounce of integrity whatsoever.
Check
The
this
only
out.
time you can be a baller is if you're literally a sheep and you're following the rest and you're not sure. But the reality is, Rupif absolutely knows that you have to apply perspective, and he knows that it isn't being applied, and he knows that he must do it. It's embarrassing, Rue.
The boss 24611. Can you prove that you have to account for perspective in the curve calculator? That's not my job to prove that you have to account for reality when calculating these things. You can ignore reality and perspective if you choose to, and you do if you use those curve maths. You are ignoring perspective. It omits perspective. It does not include perspective. Perspective is omitted.
Well,
Hello.
he's done it sneakily. To be fair, let's put it in its proper context. The meta curve calculator does not address in any way the target of the thing that you're looking at. So whether it's a building or a mountain or whatever. Oh, well done, whoever got him. I didn't see him join.
I got him.
It doesn't address the target that you're looking at in any way. It just tells you the amount that it should be hidden behind the curve, which is it's an indirect reference. It relies on the user of the site to apply the values themselves, the hidden value themselves. And obviously, the ballers always apply the number against the full height. So in this case, if it's 1,000-foot mountain at 30 miles away, they always make you put in the 1,000 feet. And that relies on us to spot that it's wrong. Now, most of the time, it will be an innocent mistake. But I've never once seen a baller suggest that we should consider perspective as an issue. And we should. And we don't do it. And nobody's really ever spotted it on a big scale before. But I know that most of the key players in Flat Earth have spotted it in the past, and it's just a correction that's just never been exaggerated or not. What's the word? Pushed.
Yeah, the point hasn't been laboured enough, basically. And ultimately, if there is a very real fact of life that every man, woman, child, camera, camcorder does take into effect, then absolutely this will have to be factored into your calculations if you're going to compare them to photographs. Because photographs, like every man, woman, child and camcorder, all take into account perspective when you use the shutter. Therefore, you must calculate for it, and you do not. If you're a baller, fantasist, believing idiot.
And of course, the other thing is that they do make an adjustment for this so-called bendy light bullshit, the bending of light around the curve of the Earth. So if they're prepared to make an adjustment for the bending of light, then making adjustments is fair game. But they don't make adjustments for perspective, which is of course where the deception comes from. You don't reduce the height. That is exactly where the deception is.
Just make adjustments retrospectively. That's what we're finding right now, especially with Mick West.
I'd like to know if Alan agrees with us. Alan, do you agree that perspective should be adjusted for in perspective, in first-person view on the curve calculator?
No.
Why not?
Why not?
Not needed.
Don't need
Not
perspective?
needed.
What are you talking about? We all encounter perspective, and does every photograph we've ever compared to those calculations. Why on earth would you want to ignore it?
Where's Arwen?
That's not an answer to my question. Why would you ignore something that every single man, woman and child encounters when they open their eyes in the morning, and every photograph ever taken in existence encounters when it is actually produced? Why would you ignore this?
If Arwen's so magical, why does he never get laid?
This isn't about Arwen's sex life. This is about your ludicrous notion that we should ignore perspective. Why would you ever assert such nonsense?
Tell me why it should be there.
Because we encounter it every day, every single time we look at anything ever or take a photograph of it, Alan. Is that not clear?
Not really. It's not required.
Oh, well, I'll explain it again. Every time you look at anything, you encounter perspective. That is a very real fact of life and can be proven with every single image ever taken in history. So I'll ask again, why, given the fact that you always, without exception, encounter perspective, would it be omitted from your calculations? Why would that be the case?
I told you before, Nathan, that it's not required in the calculation.
Why is it not required? Why is something we all encounter being omitted? Why would you ever suggest that it's not required when it's a fact of life?
Why don't you pop off and ask Mick West?
We have, and he didn't have an answer.
Well, no, I have had an answer. I have. I'll come to the answer he's given in a minute.
So, back to Alan. Why would you feel that it is acceptable to ignore something that you encounter every single time you take a picture of anything?
I'm not listening, Jeremy Kyle.
You just don't want to answer your ludicrous suggestion that you should ignore perspective and that's acceptable?
You're talking mumbo jumbo again.
No, I'm talking about something that every man, woman and child who has ever looked at anything ever has experienced, and you call that mumbo jumbo? Are you denying perspective exists? Are you a perspective denier?
Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder.
Are you a perspective? I said every man, woman and child who's ever seen anything. Try to listen. So, obfuscation aside, why would you ever deny perspective? That's ludicrous.
Not denying it is not required in the calculation.
So your calculation doesn't require accounting for reality. Why would that be?
Because it doesn't have a target in the calculator.
Yes. So why would you ever use it without adjusting the target, as every single person who has ever come on this show has done?
Yeah, he's right.
It's not required.
It is required. Perspective is a fact. To just assert that perspective can be denied is ludicrous. So why would anybody who has ever used that calculator, as you point out, not adjust the target?
Because it's called a curve calculator, Nathan.
Yeah, and we are comparing it, you are comparing it, whilst begging the question of R, to photographs to decide how much should or shouldn't be seen. Yet in reality, it is not comparable because it doesn't account for perspective.
Doesn't need to.
It does need to if you're going to compare it to a photograph, which is what it's been used for.
No, it doesn't.
Sorry,
Yeah,
you're
it
saying it
doesn't.
hasn't been used to compare to photographs. So GemPanda and Rumpus, a paper explanator, a Negator XX, these people haven't compared the calculations that calculator spits out to photographs. Is that what you're asserting here?
I suggest you pop off to Scott Veach's latest videos and watch those and find out that
We're
you're
asking
both
you.
incredibly
I don't
wrong.
want to know about someone else's video. I'm asking why you deny perspective.
I'm asking you to actually do some research.
All right.
I have
so
done
what
some
part-
research. My research has turned up that your calculations omit perspective.
You haven't done any research.
What part of the video are you
Documented
talking
on about 300 debates. What are you talking about? People can go back and find out exactly how our path has led us to this conclusion. We have done research. The research has concluded that your maths doesn't account for the very real nature of perspective. And you're just saying it's not necessary. And
How about-
excusing
how about-
every
how
single
about-
baller who has ever been on the panel and presented those calculations in comparison to photography. Totally fallacious and incorrect because it doesn't account for perspective.
Oh, look, I can see Ireland.
Sorry,
Oh, it's
why are
a-
you doing this? Why aren't you addressing the fact that you're a
I think-
perspective denier?
I think what he's doing, Nath, is he hasn't got the skill to articulate the position, and he basically wants us to go to M. Scott Veach's video and look. But I know what M. Scott Veach's video his position is, and his position is that you apply the target hidden value against the full height of the object, and that's wrong.
Correct. That doesn't account for perspective if you apply the full height. If you draw a single line between you and target, you will maintain the actual target height. However, that is not how we view the world. There is an angular size reduction at distance. Things do get smaller as they get further away. This is a fact of life, and you don't account for it. All these guys are doing is trying to justify and excuse their denial of perspective.
I agree completely.
So M. Scott Veach is just a perspective denier. We do not view the world in an orthographic view.
And to be fair, in Alan's defence, I don't think Alan understands the point. I don't think he's being dishonest.
It's not our problem that he can't understand simple questions.
That's a bit
Nope.
rich coming from you, Ranty. You can't even focus a camera.
There's no need to ad hom him. You haven't even answered our question. You've just denied perspective is necessary and justified every person who has ever used that calculator to compare to
Watch
a
the
photograph.
video, not required.
It is required. Perspective is real. You're just a perspective denier. To tell me that perspective isn't required when it is something I experience every time I open my eyes is ludicrous. Kind of an
Surprised
idiot. What
you-
kind of
you
an idiot
experience it.
denies perspective? I'll
No,
tell you
it's
what
not
kind of
required.
idiot. A globe head. You.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, you deny
think it's
perspective. You think it's not important. You think it can be omitted, and it can't.
Alan, let me ask you a
Has,
question.
and it will be.
Alan, let me ask you a question. Do you think it is not required because M. Scott Veach told you it's not? Or do you think that it's not required because you don't understand it and everybody else seems to say that, so you'll go with them?
It's not a stereometric calculator, Tony. It's not required.
Yeah,
Do you
don't
understand
listen.
that when we have the
It's
We
It's
have
being
had
used for
people
the wrong-
compare what it spits out to photography. Is that a correct comparison or
It's a
an
curve
incorrect?
calculator.
Oh, you're
want-
talking over me
want-
before I finish my question. Now I've got it down to this detail.
Of course it is. Of
Is
course
it
is.
correct?
I'll tell
See, you're not going to
you-
shut your mouth now. You're very silent before.
No.
Now I've got
No.
down to the nitty gritty of the
I'm not
detail. You
shutting
can't
up.
shut
You
up.
big bully.
See?
You big
Now I will
bully.
ask my question.
No, you
Is
won't.
it acceptable to compare photography, which does account for perspective, with that calculation, which does not account for perspective? Is that acceptable?
The silence.
I don't mind. Sit on mute if you want, Alan. Don't want to answer this very difficult and awkward question that
I
basically
would have
exposes
answered, but
the errors.
ranted
No,
you.
you were on mute while I was waiting for you to talk.
Wasn't I,
Now you'll
Billy?
listen to me. Yeah? You don't want to answer a very difficult question that basically highlights the fact that every single glober who has ever used this calculation and not accounted for the target height reduction at distance has got it wrong.
There you go. Ranty Flat Earth muted you. Doesn't want an answer, does he?
It's not requiring an answer anymore. I've made it into a statement. Every single glober who has ever compared a photograph to that calculation has got it wrong. There is a secondary function that needs to be applied prior to the calculation, which is the angular size reduction at distance. Nobody's ever applied it. They've all got it wrong.
Alan, can I just ask, what is the video that you're referencing? Is it his first video? That's called Another Go at
Links in
Perspective.
chat, Tony. Links in the side chat.
What I'll do, I'll go and watch it, and then I'll come back to you, and I'll come back to you with where the problem is, and then we can discuss the problem. You've cited a video, and if we go and look into it and then come back, will you discuss it with us?
Certainly will.
Okay, I'll be back shortly.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark. You all right?
Yeah, great.
Any photography for us today?
Nope. Not today, folks.
Bummer.
What about you?
No, not today. The weather was too crap.
Yeah.
How many subs do you have now, Mark?
Well, I don't know. I'll check.
Have a quick look.
Do some shout outs while there's a bit of a pause. Hello,
Shout
Pepto.
out to
Good
you.
to have you. Dawn Treader. Nice to see you. Frank. Thanks for being in our chat. Ute. Hello. Saunders. Thanks for being here. Kunrich. Thanks for being in our chat room. Pleasure to have you here. Nordy. Nice to see you. Steve Fowler. Hello. Richie from Bullshit. Hello. Two-Dimensional Delusion. Good to have you here as well. The Boss. Said hello to you earlier. Ninja Man. Good to see you as well. Gamer Tamer. Dr. McFlurfer. Do you like pizza? I do like pizza. Peanuts, good to see you. John Boyce, hello. David Reed. As I See the World, hello. Any more for any more? Sarah, good to see you. Silent, what's that? Silent something.
Nihilist.
Slight nihilist, yeah, sorry. Sunlight's on my screen in that little bit. I think that's it. Effie Viking in at last minute. Oh, there we go. Goddess Witch Bella, thanks for being here. Oh, there's more. God. Zal BTT. That's got to be it. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please share the show.
That should do for now.
Pete
Pete Shea.
Shea.
I've got to say hello to Pete Shea.
Yeah, Pete Shea. Hello. Dodo Power. Shout out to Aristarchus and all that nonsense. I mean, all that stuff.
Well, I managed to get all my files back from my old hard drives, so they're on this PC now. So I'll have to go through them and see what's useful and what's not. But essentially, you know, like those red lines, blue lines, white lines, etc., that we put through the wind turbines, we could perhaps redo them now. I've got a 1080p monitor.
Yeah, sure.
It'll be a bit clearer. Yeah.
Shout out to Vinegar Strokes for the super chat. Thank you very much. Let me know when you're ready and I'll stick you up.
Trying to find something worth looking at, to be honest. got so much that I need to go through. I've got like a year's worth of videos on here. So that's a lot when I've got like 4,000 videos.
Take your time.
I am. So much to go through. My early photography wasn't very good. So we're waiting for you to produce some ball earth proof. Because you're a photographer, aren't you? So I'm sure you'll have caught the curvature plenty of times. Alan.
I don't think I've caught it as many times as you, though.
Yeah, but surely you must have something to show us.
I'm mostly getting into star photography.
Why would you be looking up to try and find out where you live? Makes no sense.
Not interested in the Milky Way?
I'm interested in where I live. I wouldn't be interested in some lights in the sky. And you have to admit that is pretty ridiculous to try and look up to find out where you live.
All right, guys.
Hey, Dawn. Shout out to John for the super chat. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Hiya, Dawn.
Wow, you're loud.
I was going to wait, but then I just joined because Randy said he's not interested in lights in the sky. It's kind of strange.
Kind of strange for somebody who lives in Blackpool. He's probably bored of them.
Can you all mute if you're not talking? There's a bit of echo from someone.
I'll check the show back. Nathan, you turned my voice down quite low last time.
Yeah, too low. I'm really sorry. You just
Sorry.
join every time you join. You're mega loud, but I checked your volume now. You're pretty much the same as everyone else, I hope.
Okay, cheers. So Riley's watching the Veach videos.
The what, sorry?
Scott Veach's video.
Apparently.
So do you really? Sorry, you're really not interested in the lights in the sky, Randy, at all?
Not especially.
Okay.
Perhaps you could debate it with Alan for a moment whilst I find something worthwhile watching.
We went through it with you last time, Dawn. Your preconceived notions about the lights in the sky are that they're distant galaxies, and the only reason you have that preconceived notion is because you have a presuppositional value of R that has been used to measure them.
No, they're still interesting without knowing what R is. R could be double. I don't care.
Can you all mute? There's still echo from whoever.
They come back to me when you got a gap.
There is a gap. I was just explaining to Dawn, although he denied it, that in order for the distant galaxies to be distant galaxies, you need to be measuring on an arc to get them to be distant. I.e., you need a bit of R.
What I'll do, Nath, we'll have to do a little bit of a slight change to how we do this because you're the one with the sound. The link that Alan sent to me, I'm going to send to you, and the time and the timestamp is 7:22 in the video. It would be cool if you could play it on Skype so that the sound comes through, and then you just manage and control when you want to stop it. But he starts off with the sentence, "Do you want to know what you guys have done wrong?" And then he starts on with his spiel. It's well worth listening to because it's wrong from the start. It's completely wrong from the start. But he's explaining it in the way that he's consistent in that he hasn't changed his view from the last time I heard him. But he's wrong from the start on so many levels. But he doesn't even get it.
Okay, so do you want to hear what your mistake is? Because I'll tell you. I will absolutely tell you what your mistake is because I know what it is. In fact, you know what? Fuck it. Let's start from scratch. And let's see if I can teach you some things that evidently you weren't able to learn on your own. And you need to pay attention, Nathan, because if you don't understand the things I'm about to tell you, then you don't understand anything at all. And that goes for you too, Riley. Although, if I'm going to be completely honest, I guess I would say I'm a little bit less worried about you. But look, you're both making a mistake here. And you both need to pay attention because this is your opportunity. This is your chance to correct your mistake. All right, so the first thing that you guys need to understand and accept is that ultimately, when push comes to shove, the things that we perceive, the things that we see, all depend on light rays bouncing off an object and being reflected into our eyes. A light comes down, it hits the object, it bounces off and into our eyes, and that is when we see the point. If we're seeing the point, it means that a light ray has hit our eyes. If we don't see the point on the object, it means the light ray didn't hit our eyes. It's an if and only if relationship.
Is that enough?
Yeah. Basically, he starts to describe how the light bounces off the sun, it comes from the sun. It bounces off the target, and then it looks in your eye. And he's beginning to explain the error in our ways. But look at how he's presenting the error in our ways. He's presenting it orthographically, which is the point that we're making. This is not how we observe the Earth. We observe the Earth from first-person perspective, and things appear to get smaller in the distance. But notice how he's not reduced the height of any mountain because of perspective. So he's trying to tell us that we've made a mistake based on an orthographic representation to make the point that we've made a mistake, whilst making a mistake himself. So really, you don't really need to play anymore, but it would have been useful if you'd have shown what was on screen, just so that people in chat could see what he was showing, because he was making the mistake, the exact mistake that me and Nathan are beating the drum about, yet he's not realizing he's making the mistake. So he's either realizing he's making a mistake and he's passing it off dishonestly, or he's a retard. It's one or the other.
Tony, did you watch all the video?
Well, did I need to hear any more than the mistake that he's making from the start?
Yes.
Tell us what.
For what reason?
Watch it all, then come back.
Well, before he does, so what we've got in terms of the picture on screen for the audience is a single line between target and observer. We do not see a single line, and in order to calculate how big this thing is, you would need to draw 2 lines so you could calculate the angle, because that is how we see things. We don't see down a straw, which is what this is drawing. This is drawing us looking down a straw. We don't. We see an all-encompassing view of the world, and when we look at something specific, we get an angle to it. We would have the measurement to the top and the measurement to the bottom. That would be your viewing angle. Not a single line. This single line represents them denying perspective, because it doesn't give you any opportunity to measure the angle that you would see it with, i.e. giving you the ability to reduce its angular size, i.e. perspective. And as Anthony correctly points out, we have a side elevation. This isn't coming from this man's eyeballs now, is it? We're seeing his head. Well, we don't ever see the side of our own head when we view something. We look from this position, from our eyeballs. Now, it is actually capable to model from first person in orthographic view, but again, it ignores perspective. So while they could translate this view into a first person view, it still would undoubtedly ignore perspective, which is what you need in order to calculate something's angular size at distance. How much has it reduced in size versus its distance? And they don't. They give you one line maintaining the target's height. Well, that's not how we see the world. So, M. Scott Veach, bad news, my friend. This single line represents you denying perspective, which is precisely what you do. This side elevation, not showing us the eyeballs of the observer, while Alan talks all over me. This side elevation showing us not from the position of this guy's eyes, like every single photograph ever presented ever.
Watch the full video.
It's not.
Sorry, shut up about your full video. We've watched it. He's got it wrong. Do you deny what we've just said, Alan?
Yes,
Alan, do you not understand what I've just explained? I've just explained to you that it gives you a single line. You can't calculate an angle with a single line. And what we are talking about, is an angular size reduction, Alan. You could shut up long enough. We are talking about angular size reduction, Alan. And it doesn't account for any angles, does it? You can't shut your mouth long enough to listen, though, can
well
you?
done, Alan. You've got it exactly right. Well done, that man. Well done, Alan. You
Do that again,
understand it.
Alan.
An orthographic view shows 2D objects in 3D.
No, it does 3D objects in 2 dimensions.
Yeah, you got that run the wrong way, actually. Alan.
So you were 100% wrong, Rumpus.
No, he got it round the well. He's getting it right though. There's a 3D and a 2D transformation.
Yeah,
in
and
orthographic.
also
We don't see things in 2D though, do we? We see things with perspective.
Yes, but it's showing you 3D information. That view that in M. Scott's video is not an orthographic view. It's a side elevation. It's a purely 2D thing.
You're lying.
No, shut up, you little wanker. Shut up, you little wanker. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't accuse me of lying. You little wanker.
Get angry,
Stupid
Rumpus.
little
Go
wanker.
on.
You don't know what the hell
Get
you're
angry.
talking about.
It's really funny. Go on, get angry.
Jesus Christ,
Go
you're
on,
a
get
stupid
really
little
angry.
wanker.
Get angry. Go on.
Yeah, well, he's a wanker.
Deny
I mean,
perspective
saying
for my audience.
Because he's
Do it.
stupid.
Deny
because
perspective.
he's stupid.
Do it.
Because
Deny
he's stupid.
perspective for my audience. Go
Because
on.
he's
Do
stupid.
it. Deny it.
Because he's stupid,
Deny
he thinks that's a
perspective.
foundation for. He thinks being stupid, not understanding something, is a foundation for accusing other people of lying. He's a moron, utter moron.
You're a perspective denier.
You do not know what you're talking about, Anthony.
You're a
Have a
perspective
bit of
denier.
humility. Try and learn something before you spout drivel about it.
You're being dishonest, Rumpus.
I'm not being dishonest. You're a moron. You don't know what you're talking
Just
about.
ad homs.
No, you're being dishonest, Rumpus.
No, I'm not,
You know
you
what
moron.
orthography is.
You do not know what orthographic is.
Yeah,
It's
we
a
do.
way of representing.
You know
3D
what orthography is.
What?
You know what orthography is, and you know that M. Scott Veach has demonstrated orthographically the point he's making.
Not
Is
an
our mistake.
orthographic. Look, let me show you an orthographic projection.
We don't
Please
care.
do.
Your calculations don't account for perspective. So this little
And they're not-
ham-handed
right,
distraction won't
the
work.
calculations don't need to because it's not drawing a picture. Let me show you a picture.
Right, but it's
of an
being
orthographic
compared to
view.
a picture, isn't it? Being compared to
Well,
photographs,
yeah, well,
isn't it?
that's something that's an entirely secondary operation.
Right, and you don't account for that secondary operation when you compare
Well,
these
because it's not
calculations
trying
to
to draw a
photographs.
picture. Here we go.
You're
Oh,
right.
why are you
he's
talking
not
over
trying
me?
to draw a picture, but
Why are you talking over me?
Making us apply it.
Hold on, no, we've got
orthographically.
three things. We've got three questions on the go. Let me deal with the first one.
There is no questions. We're making a statement of fact.
Well,
you do
well,
not
I'm letting-
account
look, I'm dealing
for
with three- okay,
perspective.
I've got three issues on the go.
So you're
here. Let's
talking
deal with the
no,
orthographic one
no
first.
issue. We're
You've got
making
more
a
issues
statement
than
of
that,
fact,
mate.
Rumpus. You
Well,
don't
with
account
three
for
being brought
perspective.
up just here.
You need to make some
Right.
retractions.
Oh.
You haven't accounted for perspective in your
You want
calculations
me
when
to-
you've compared
you're gonna
these
interrupt me,
calculations
Nathan.
to
You
photographs.
just interrupt me. You're going to allow me to talk and respond to Anthony's claim about orthographic, right?
No, because that's
This
not the
is
claim. The claim
Oh,
is that you
jeez.
don't account for perspective in your calculations, and you compare.
I'll do that. I'll answer this question in a
Don't
minute, Nathan.
talk
I'm more than
over
happy
me,
to go
Rumpus,
into
or I'll
that.
kick you out.
I'm more than happy to go into that. Right. Let's deal with the orthographic thing first.
No, your
No,
calculations
yes,
don't
let's-
account for
let's.
perspective.
I'm more than happy to discuss the perspective thing. I love talking about it because it makes you look such an idiot.
Right.
But
Well,
I'll
your
just deal with
calculations
things in
don't
order.
account for perspective, and the
I'll
secondary
just deal with things
function.
in order.
You're just talking over me, so I'm going to have to shut you up. Yeah. Your calculations do not incorporate perspective, and the secondary function that you have just detailed that needs to be applied has never been applied.
I'm trying to explain to Anthony about orthographic, and then I'll move on to the perspective thing.
No.
Here is an
No.
orthographic view.
What part of no don't you understand? Yeah? I'm not interested in your definitions of perspective or side elevation or orthographic. This is a statement of fact. Your mathematics do not account for perspective, and they need to when you apply these calculations in comparison to photographs. And that is precisely what you have done. You need to start making some retractions. You've got it wrong. I have dozens and dozens of examples of you, Rumpus, getting it completely wrong. Over and over and over again. Never applying the secondary function. Never applying perspective. You won't apply it. All you want to do is talk about
Why
the
do you
different
want
views.
him to conduct himself in a reasonable manner? If
One,
he conducted himself in a reasonable manner, we wouldn't have the problem.
Stop interrupting me while I talk.
I don't know. You interrupted me, Nathan. I was talking. I was trying to give an answer to Anthony.
I haven't
That's
asked
what
you
was
any
happening.
questions.
You tried to interrupt me.
I haven't asked you any
Right.
questions.
Right. Anthony asked me a question about well, it was an issue of orthographic. Here
So he
is
didn't ask you
orthographic-
any questions. No questions have been asked. We're just going to state this fact again. You've got it wrong. You need to start making some retractions, Rumpus. Every single time you have used this calculator and compared it to a photograph, you have not applied the secondary function of perspective. And it is absolutely necessary to do so if you are going to compare something that does not compare to viewing functionality with a picture. You've never done it. You start making retractions here.
Twat.
You don't get to talk
You're being a
about
twat,
anything
Nathan.
else other than your
You're being a
errors that
twat,
you've made.
Nathan. You're being a twat, Nathan. All right. So
You're just talking over
orthographic
me.
projection.
Right,
Here's
you've just
the
called me a
example.
twat in my own hangout.
And,
right, you don't get to do that here,
and
Rumpus.
here
Right,
we-
you don't get to
so
talk continually
hopefully
while I
Anthony can
talk.
see how this is different to a side elevation.
Yeah, you don't
And you
get
can
to talk.
see that what it's trying to do is it's trying to
Get
present.
out. You don't talk over me. You certainly don't call me a twat while I point out that your calculator denies perspective. Yeah, you don't get to do that, Rumpus. You're not just going to come
Can
here
I
and
just
talk
say,
over
I totally
everybody.
agree with what you've just done. He deserves to go out simply because he will not allow anybody else to hear what's being said by Nathan in the background because
Right.
he continues to talk over.
Yep, just continually talks, says the same sentence over and over and over again, so no one can hear what's
I
going
did
on.
talk all over him.
I host this show, Alan, right? So if I want to be heard, you can be damn sure I will be. Do you understand?
Yes, Nazi.
No, not Nazi, host. I run this show and produce it and
Try and be a
dedicate a
bit more
huge
congenial
chunk.
and friendly.
Shut up! I dedicate a huge chunk of my life to producing this show. If you continue to talk, you go too. Simple. I dedicate a huge chunk of my life to producing this show. Rumpus, on the other hand, dedicates a huge chunk of his life denying perspective. Now, I'm going to point that out to my audience. Rumpus can come in and say, oh, you don't understand orthographic versus side elevation. That's a red herring. The issue
No, it's
here
not.
is...
It's quite
the
clear you
issue
don't
here...
understand it.
Shut up! The issue here is your calculations' denial of perspective and the secondary function having never been applied ever when these calculations have been compared to photographs. That is the issue. He doesn't want to address it. He wants to address what he thinks is Anthony's misconceptions about side elevation versus orthographic, a question that has never been raised. We absolutely do understand the difference between the two. We also understand implicitly that perspective is not being applied when you compare photographs to what your calculations spit out.
I'm just seeing if I can find what before Rumpus was kicked. He was going to make a presentation or he was going to demonstrate something, and it was talking about how orthographic view preserves the relative sizes, and that's the point. It preserves the size. It doesn't reduce it for the distance as a function of the distance. So yeah, it would have been good to keep him in the one on the one hand, but it would have been bad to keep him in because we wouldn't have got anywhere because when he disagrees, he just attacks.
Rumpus's tactic is to talk non-stop. So literally, if anybody else speaks, they will not be heard by any other member of the panel, and he will not shut up. Well, I'm not going to tolerate it.
It's because he knows that he has to obfuscate his way out of this. He has to bullshit because otherwise he knows he's wrong. Rumpus knows what orthography is. He knows that it's about preserving the sizes and the dimensions to make it look like easy on the eye. But the reality is that's the problem. But he's going to support why it's a good thing and ignore why it's an issue, which is exactly what M. Scott Veach did.
You didn't watch the full video, though, did you, Tony?
He does admit to it. He says, yes, I understand it. It's a secondary function. It's not what the calculator's designed for. Like that's some sort of justification when he himself has compared photographs to this non-viewing function calculation. Well, he understands it. He's just here to obfuscate. He gets it. Every time he comes on, he concedes it every single time. He understands it and confesses that it's a secondary function that needs to be applied. He says it every time. Oh, am I losing my panel?
Tony's just gone to watch the rest of that video.
Oh, right.
One of the problems with you lot is you don't watch the full thing.
Sorry, you didn't address anything that we said about the bit that we did address. So we addressed the fact that he draws a single line. We don't see the world through a straw. We take an all-encompassing view. It would require more than one line being drawn to the target in order to account for the angular size. And yet we see one line drawn inside elevation. Nothing like the view of the world presented against these calculations.
Nathan, why don't you get Chris Mong to do the equations for perspective? Maybe compare with one of the online perspective calculators there already.
We have.
And then ask Mick West, because he did say he'd add it if you did the equations, didn't he?
I have. We have. We did it this morning.
Okay.
I pre-recorded it.
So there's no problem then.
No,
I don't think
it
they
never
understand
was.
that,
This isn't a
Mr.
problem for
Scott
us,
Veach
Dawn.
wasn't trying to calculate the angular size.
This isn't a problem for us, right? We're not looking at calculating the angular size after the fact. Every single time this calculator has been used to date, I've said this about 4 times, nobody has accounted for the angular size then. They take the measurements as is, and they are wrong when used in comparison with a photograph, because they do not account for perspective. There is a secondary function, which is not being applied. How many times do I have to say it?
It doesn't make it wrong.
Yes, it does. It doesn't
Not-
account for
no.
reality, Dawn. Perspective is a thing that we all encounter.
Yeah, but this is not a reality calculator, is it? It's a
Oh,
hidden
really? So why are you
and
comparing it to
job
reality then?
calculator.
Why are you comparing it to photographs of reality then, Dawn?
I don't, mate. I hate the
Yeah, you
calculator.
do.
I think it's-
You
I
do.
think it's a troll.
Plenty of Globers out there. We've got Gem Panda, we've got Rumpus himself, we've got Negator XX, we've got Paper Explanator. All of these Globers, line them all up in a row. You've all got it wrong, dickheads.
They
Yeah,
only use
Mick
it-
West just didn't tell you that the calculator needed an angular size reduction applying to the target, but that's not his problem because it's not in the calculator, right? So you can go and blame him if you want to, but it doesn't make
I
any
think
difference.
the calc
Every
didn't even
idiot who has ever used this calculator has got it wrong. Simple.
Welcome back, Tony.
I've watched from 9:30, like you said, and his point is not the point we're making. It's a straw man. He's making the point that perspective can never ever obscure or account for things not being visible. Well, that's not our point. The point is that perspective is not being accounted for before we apply the hidden value, the refracted hidden value. So, oh, hang on.
So thank you for wasting our time with that strawman, Alan. That was very handy.
Yeah, it's a strawman argument, Al, because we're not saying that perspective causes things to be obstructed.
But
We're
that's
saying,
exactly his point.
yeah, but we're saying that's not our point. Our point is that perspective is never applied to reduce the size of the
So
target.
apply it if you want to apply it. That's up to you, isn't it? There's
Well,
no problem. No one's going to say, why are you applying perspective? You shouldn't.
No, what we are saying, Dawn, is that no one has applied it to date. So every time someone has come on this debate and put that calculator on screen and said this is how much curve there should be there, and then they say how much is what we're looking at? Oh, it's 500 feet. Oh, it's 1,000 feet. Wrong. They needed to apply an angular size reduction. So every single time that somebody has claimed a victory using that calculator, they've got it very, very, very wrong. Because they've ignored an angular size reduction that we all take into account every time we open our eyes or take a photograph of anything, Dawn. So it's all wrong.
How do you apply hidden to an angular size?
Who cares? That's not our problem. We're not claiming the Earth is a sphere using a fictitious value of r that we insert into this calculation and simultaneously deny perspective. That's not what any of us are doing here. That's what you guys use to confirm your own presupposition. That's what you guys do.
All perspective does, though, is tell us how big it appears.
Any
Right.
placeholders want to join, just so we can control this little lunatic? All perspective does, Alan, is what?
Tells us how big it appears.
Jay Farrow, is he
We
friendly?
need to find out how big it appears. We've got a photograph of it. We can see it in the picture. The problem comes when you calculate how much you assume we should see based on your presuppositional value of r. And when you do those calculations, you do not account for an angular size reduction in the target.
This is a straw man.
No, it's not. Perspective is real. R has no scientific backing whatsoever. Perspective is experienced by every man, woman and child who has ever viewed anything ever, Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why is it a straw man when it's our criticism of that metabunk curve calculator?
Because the calculator doesn't calculate things you can see.
But it's not
Correct.
a straw man.
Correct, Alan. So every time someone's used it to calculate against something we can see, i.e. a photograph, they've got it wrong. Right,
No.
Alan?
No.
So they've got it right when then comparing things we see to a calculator that doesn't calculate for things we can see. Silence.
It's not what it's measuring.
Yeah, we get it. It's not measuring reality. It doesn't account for an angular size reduction. That's why it's wrong. That's the whole point. You have to apply a secondary function, i.e. the angular size reduction at distance. That's how it works. If you don't account for it, like every single person who has ever presented an image next to those calculations, they've got it wrong, Alan. That's the point. Some retractions are needed.
Alan, why is it a straw man in your opinion?
You can't see it though, can you, Tony?
Can't see what?
Why it's a straw man.
Yeah, a straw man is an argument that wasn't previously brought up.
I think you're just confused.
No, you're just a
Alan, are you being
perspective denier.
intellectually honest
He's
at
not
this point?
confused. You're a
Yes.
perspective denier.
No, I'm not. I just don't understand why you can't see it.
See what? Perspective. We
can't
do
see that
see
it's
it
not a
every
straw
time we
man?
take a picture of anything. Perspective is something we see, Alan. We do see perspective. You just don't account for it or calculate for it. And you deny it when we ask why it isn't necessary. You say it's not needed. Well, it is needed.
Nathan, you can get the code off Mick and make your own curve calculator with a perspective mode. No one cares.
What do
They
you mean
might
make
think
my
it's
own
cool. Some
curve
people
calc?
might think it's cool.
Make
Yeah,
a
but
curve
hang on,
calc. What are
do
you
think will
talking
happen
about?
if we reduce Mako Lighthouse down to its angular size, given it's 31 miles away, and then it drops behind the curve, the apparent geometric curve of the Earth, we're not even going to see that lighthouse or any part of it, and you're never going to bring any of it back. Do you understand the effect it has?
What do you mean take it back?
It means
Because
when
we're
you
applying
calculated the
geometric curve
maths.
against the height of it at 230 feet, wasn't it, Nathan?
It's not going to change what you see, is it?
Yeah,
No, it's not
makes
going
it
to
that
change
much
what we see in the
smaller.
photograph, but you already think you're seeing holograms in the photograph. Yet when you apply the angular size reduction, the thing's so long gone it's untrue. It's not like you can bring it back with a bit of refraction maths. Yeah? It's
Nathan,
then
do you
beyond...
apply angular size before you see something?
We
Yeah, of
see
course.
it in the
That's what your
photograph,
eyes do.
Alan. You don't have to calculate anything. You just click the shutter and voila! Perspective presents itself every time. It's amazing.
What hits the eye and the sensor first?
Who cares? Perspective is accounted for when you photograph something. I don't give a crap how you think you are clever about a camera, right? I see perspective, my camera sees perspective, my video recorder sees perspective, my iPhone sees perspective, everyone with eyes sees perspective, yet you don't account for it. Because you're a muppet with a faith in an R value. That's all you are, a religious zealot.
No, I don't think he's a muppet. I think Alan's a victim. I think he's just accepting what everybody else is saying, and I think
No, I'm
Bones
not.
is in the
I'm
boat.
telling you that light gets there before perspective.
Right, but what we're telling you is
Word
that
salad
it is
nonsense.
that far away that it's so much smaller that it drops behind the geometric curve, regardless of the light.
So you're saying refraction doesn't happen now?
Correct. Not the way you guys explain it. No.
If it was behind the curve, the light wouldn't get to your eyes, would it?
That's the point. But
Yeah,
the
that's
fact
the
is that
point.
the
You
light
wouldn't
is getting
see
to
it.
our eyes, and you
Well
guys
done.
need to concoct some
Yes.
story, just so story for why it's happening.
Right, we do see it, Alan, but we shouldn't, according to your maths. Not only should we see it, it should be so far beyond the curve as to never be brought back by bendy light. Hello, Goldamaro. Is that right? Can you hear us?
Nathan, I can't trust them at the minute because we've had the usual tirade of stock accounts coming in, and while they're coming in like this quick, I just can't give them a lot of time to speak.
You need to say hello if you join. So yeah, we've got a lot of perspective deniers who've made a lot of errors when they've been using this calculation that's not for viewing functionality and comparing it to photographs. They've all got it wrong.
None of them have reduced the target object down to its actual size, its apparent size, the way we see it. They've all left it in its full height size, and that's not how we see it. That's orthographic, and Rumpus knows this, and he was on his way into basically to disrupt and just.
No, it's a side view, side elevation.
Yeah, side view is orthography.
It's
That's
not
not how we observe.
This is a moot point.
The only way that would be accurate would be if he reduced the height of the mountain down to its apparent size because of the rules of perspective. If he applies perspective to it, and then puts the light ray in that M. Scott Veach was talking about, then he would see that there's a whole heap of problems. So whilst we're labouring this point, it's good for us to keep labouring this point without applying it.
Why don't you guys build one with Chris?
Well, we have done. We have done. We know what's supposed to happen. But if we present it now, it'll just be dismissed. So if we leave it and keep beating the drum about it, ultimately, eventually, someone is going to have to do it on the ball side because they will ultimately have to accept that perspective is a thing. But once they accept that it's a thing, they're fucked because it'll always make the object so small it'll drop behind the curve. So it'll never match any of the observations at anything about 25 miles onwards.
Then you should get busy with that and release it.
Not at the
It's
moment
not
because not
our
enough people have realised.
We don't
this.
have a calculator to prove the obvious fact that we see stuff when we look out in the distance. You guys have a calculator to account for why you see things when you shouldn't. And up until now, it's worked vaguely well. Sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a miss. Well, every time it's been used, it's been a miss. Every time it's been used, it's been a fail because the calculator doesn't account for perspective. It's not designed to account for viewing functionality, is it? So, when it's been used for that function, comparing to photographs, they've all got it wrong. All of these idiots that just didn't understand the mathematics of their own
You
bullshit.
did it as well, Nathan. You used it for observations of photographs.
Me, I was
That's
never
right.
trying to prove a globe with your presuppositional mathematics. I was trying to debunk
And
it.
you got it wrong every time, yeah.
No,
right.
we were asserting it was flat, my friend, and
Told
showing
him.
how your maths doesn't work. Hey,
If it's wrong
Flatner.
and you were using it, then you got it wrong as well, innit?
Using it for what? We were using it to debunk the premise, not to prove the sphere. You guys have used it
But all
to
this
prove
time
a
you were
sphere, and every time you have done, you have got it wrong. It doesn't prove a thing to begin with because it's based on a presupposition. We're 10 steps down the begging the question fallacy anyway. However, if you were to accept the presuppositional value of R and then apply those maths, every last one of the globe heads that's used it, applied it incorrectly because there's a secondary function that needed applying and they haven't applied it. They've all got it wrong, Dawn.
And Dawn, yes, we got it wrong as well because we missed the perspective angle to it. And now that we're applying that, it's so bad for the glober.
Yeah. And the reason why we got it wrong is because when we're testing your maths for your model that you believe that we live on, your model didn't tell us that perspective needs to be addressed. We're testing your maths, but your model doesn't tell us that part of the maths includes perspective, and it should tell us that. It doesn't necessarily have to account for it. I do agree, and I have some element of sympathy for Mick because he doesn't need to show it technically because he's showing the geometric drop. However, when it gets applied against a target in the distance, he should tell us that objects in the distance appear smaller than they actually are. That is the disclaimer that he should put in it, and he doesn't. He's lying by omission.
Well, like I say, it's only down to the globe heads who've applied it. They're the ones who've got it wrong. And Mick, this is what I said. I said this to you a couple of days ago, and you disagreed.
Nathan. You got it wrong as well.
You
That's
said
right.
I pointed out that Mick could easily weasel his way out, and you were like, no, he can't. And now you've completely turned your opinion around to agree with me, which is to say that it's not him. Hi, Mark. How you doing? You hear us?
Hey, how's it going?
Good to have you.
Nathan, what angle Dawn's trying to get is he wants you to concede that you've made mistakes in the past too on this, but I will do it for you. Me and Nathan do realise, accept and acknowledge that every baller and every flat earther who's used Metabunk's curve calculator has applied it incorrectly because that's what we're told to do on the sphere that we're supposed to live on. So we have made mistakes. We all have.
I don't actually agree, but I'm saying if you're saying that Glober's made a mistake, you obviously made the same one.
Correct. You
the
are
mistake
correct.
falls in our favour, and we're not using it to apply what it's designed to apply. You're using it as proof of Earth curve. We're trying to debunk it, and this omission is massively in our favour. It absolutely obliterates every single observation that's ever been used with this calculation. They're so far off in terms of anything like what it claims the Earth should look like, as it's absurd.
He made it for you.
I don't care whether he made... No, he didn't make it for us. He made it to support and bolster the argument that we live on a sphere. But in doing so...
After some people started saying it wasn't a sphere.
Yeah, he hasn't made it for us. He's made it for you guys to prove that the observations match the reality of the maths. However, we all know that objects get smaller over distance. So when he presents it in a side profile and you apply your target height of 1,000 feet, then that's going to make that target bigger than what it actually is. Now, I know in real world it's 1,000 feet, but it's 1,000 feet at 30 miles, and that's different to 1,000 feet. Now, I think that Dawn might not understand this, and I'm not being funny when I say it, Dawn, so don't have a go at me. I don't think Alan understands it, but I think that Rumpus definitely
I
understands
pretty
it.
much understand that things shrink towards the horizon. I understand.
Why don't you
Why
account
is
for it
that?
then?
Why do we not apply the shrunken height to targets when we're applying the curve calcs?
Exactly. Need to apply that hidden value after you've reduced triangular size reduction at distance. It's as simple as that. And with that, I'm going to say first and foremost a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this debate. And of course, a massive thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible. If you hated the show, you know exactly what to do. But if you like the show, consider sharing it with a friend or subscribing if you've not done so already. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!